Where did we get to? I did not join you on Friday, so how far did you get?
The professor says the bottom two words are Amar Rabba on the
Amar
bottom.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you. Amar Rafa.
And we jump right away to the next page on Chav Ches. Amar Rabba or Rabba. Shavua Tov, good luck. So the first sugya we had this sugya also was mentioned on the previous page, and that was about hearing a whole tekiah. Of course, we're going to see at the end of the Masech, you have to have a certain length. The tekiah, or tekiah, shvarm, each one has its own length, how long it has to be. But the Gemara brought a proof that even if you have the Baal Tekiah is blowing longer than necessary, you have to hear the whole tekiah. Even if you heard enough as far as the shear goes, you have to hear the whole tekiah. And this Gemara goes into that again, and it's going to seem that the Gemara might be questioning it or saying a different shita, but after the Gemara finishes, it's going to be the same thing. So the Gemara started, Rabba said this question, Rabba, Shama mixas tekiah but the bor, or mixas tekiah al sfasa bor yatsa. It seems that he's arguing on what we said earlier. Here it says that if he heard, we had the problem with the echo. The bor has the echo, and then the Mishnah said that his echo is a problem. You're not Yotzi with echo. You have to hear the original, authentic tekiah. Here it says he heard part of the tekiah inside the bor, and that the Gemara said there's no echo. And mixas tekiah al sfasa bor, when there is an echo, so it says yatsa. That's going to be a problem because that sounds like even though there was an echo in part of the tekiah, it's still good. That's going to be the Gemara's issue. But so far, I'll take it for face value that it sounds that since part of the tekiah was without an echo, even though the end of it was with an echo, he's still yotze. But then,
where's the shofar? Where is he?
So far, the Gemara doesn't think there's a difference yet. That's going to be the Gemara's answer. The Gemara thinks that it's the same. What does Rashi say over here? Because Rashi thinks that we're talking about that the listener is outside and the blower was first in the bor and then he walked out. So that would seem that the listener, when he was in the sfasa bor, or let's say I said the wrong way probably, that if the tekiah was in the bor and he was outside the bor, so he's the one who heard the echo. And then when the tekiah came out, so then there was no echo anymore. So the beginning was with an echo, then was without. That's what it would seem. And says it's good enough. That's going to be a kasha. You didn't hear the whole tekiah blast. The Rabbi continues. Mixas tekiah kodem shalom shachar mixas tekiah lacha elam shachar lo yatsa. Here is another case which seems to be similar, but it's opposite psak. Here it says that he heard the beginning of the tekiah before Amud Shachar. You're not, you'll say the mitzvah tekiah shofar only in the daytime, and time that the day starts is Amud Shachar, and he started long before Amud Shachar, and he continued into after Amud Shachar. So again, seems to be the same case that the beginning of the tekiah was not in a kosher time, and then he did blow, and you have to say that he blew long enough in the daytime, and it says that still you're not Yotzei. So this makes sense to us that the beginning of the tekiah was not kosher, even though he blew long enough in the daytime, but still the whole tekiah was not there. But that contradicts the beginning. The first statement he said was that even though the beginning was with an echo, since then was without echo, it's okay. So that's going to be the Gemara's contradiction right away. Abaye said that the two statements don't make sense; they contradict each other. How come in the second case with Amud Shachar, how come it's not good? Because the whole tekiah was not chiyuv, because the whole tekiah, the beginning of the tekiah was before Amud Shachar. So in the first case also, how can we say that as kosher if the beginning was blown in the bor? The person who was outside, he heard the echo, the leka, so he shouldn't be yotzei. So the Gemara says, first the Gemara tries to get out of it and say that there's a difference. What's the comparison? There's a difference, like an essential difference. Before Amud Shachar, it's not a time of tekiah at all. It's not the time, not this month. It's like the wrong day. It's not yet the day. So therefore, that's called that the beginning of the tekiah was not kosher at all. So therefore, the second half of the tekiah, even though there was a long enough blast, but it wasn't the whole tekiah because the beginning of the tekiah was in a time that wasn't chayiv. But in the bar, even though there's an echo, the Gemara is trying to say along the shechiluk that even though there was an echo, but it's not the etzem place. It wasn't a place that's like out of the ballpark. The case of before Amud Shachar is out of the ballpark. It's not the day, so it's not as man chiyuv. But here it's called a makam chiyuv. Even the makam chiyuv means you could be yosei the tekiah shofar in the bar. That means if there be no echo, as the Gemara said, the person who's in the bar, he doesn't hear the echo. He causes an echo to go out, but the person who's in the bar doesn't hear an echo, even though the person outside did hear the echo. But it's not as bad as other case where it's be'etzem not a time. That's what the Gemara tries to say. According to what the Gemara said so far, if you would have heard an echo in the beginning, you still could be yosei as long as the rest of the tekiah was long enough, even though you didn't hear the whole entire tekiah because the beginning was an echo. That's what the Gemara tries to say. But right away, the Gemara is going to disprove this, as we did already yesterday. The name of the Sava Rabba Shama Sof Tkiya below Tchilas Tkiya Yatza, or Mamela Tchilas Tkiya below Sof Tkiya Yatza. According to what we're saying now, it's only a problem if it's not in the Zman Chiyav at all, like it's out of the ballpark that it wasn't the daytime. But if you'd have that you only heard half of the Tkiya, that wouldn't be a problem. That you technically heard half of the Tkiya, it's okay. Of course, you have to that half had to. I keep on saying it again, just to not to make a mistake. That surely when you hear half of the Tkiya and you're going to be Yotzei, it's only going to be if that half of the Tkiya was long enough. You had extra long Tkiya. But as far as hearing the whole Tkiya, here the Gemara says that it would be possible, according to Rabbah, that even if you didn't hear the whole thing, is good enough. And the only time that it's a problem is when it wasn't as man chiyuv at all. That's called that's not as man chiyuv. But if it was a man chiyuv, mokum chiyuv, even though you didn't hear it because it was an echo, it wouldn't be a problem. And that's why I think Gemara is asking, according to this, you're saying that if you heard the end without the beginning, you're Yotzei, and so too for the same logic, if you heard the beginning without the end, you're also going to be Yotzei. So the Gemara is going to try to disprove this from the same way we tried to do it yesterday. Tashma, it says Takaba Rishona, or Mashach B'Shniya Kishtayim, and Yuyada El Achas. The Gemara is going to prove. The Gemara said this already yesterday. The same challenge, and also the way it's saying the Gemara is going to answer it in a second. That it's not going to be a proof yet. That if a person had two tkiyas to blow in a row, like how do you say the bottom of the first and the top of the second? That you have to do tkiya true tkiya, and then again tkiya true tkiya. So right there you have two tkiyas in a row, tkiya true tkiya, and then tkiya. So two tkiyas in a row, and he blew one long blast that was as long as two. Can you be Yotzei two tkiyas? So it says no, it's not good enough. If he blew the first tkiya the way he's supposed to, and then the second one, which is supposed to be a second and then a third, but he extended the second one to include as big as the second and the third. No, it only counts for one. You can't take one long one as big as two and say that I did two times. And the kasha is, if you say that half the key is good enough, the beginning without the half without the beginning, so every long key you should say, I heard two. Amai, why doesn't it count to two? To salik lebatati, let it count as two, because it's as big as two, and the beginning is good enough, and the half is good enough, and the end is good enough. So you have the beginning, that's good, that's a tkiya, and you have the half, that's a tkiya. So the one wants to prove that half tkiya is not good enough. But this again, the Gemara says not a proof. That's not a kasha. Even if you say that half tkiya would be good enough, that doesn't mean if you have one big long one, you could divide it into two. Nothing's there to divide it. So we're still holding on to the potential possibility that half tkiya is good enough. Just in this case, that doesn't mean that you could divide it into two halves. But now the Gemara is going to have the upshlag. This is going to be the disproof that it's not true. You do have to hear the whole tkiya from beginning to end, and it's not good enough to have an echo in the beginning or the end. Tashma, it says in the Mishnah, if somebody blew into a pit or a cistern or a barrel, if you heard the shofar, the authentic shofar, then it's good. But if you heard the echo, it's not good. And the Gemara understands that he did hear, even if he would have heard the tkiya blast before the echo mixed in, and he had enough, as far as the amount of the tkiya, he had a long enough tkiya even before the echo started, it's still not good. Why not? If you say that the beginning is enough or the end is enough, here we had the beginning without the end. Why is it not Yotzei? They pick B'tchilas Tkiya Mekam the Lav of Kol. Let me Yotzei with the beginning before it got mixed in with the echo. So here the Gemara proves that it's not true. You do have to hear the whole Tkiya. So back to the beginning of the page, Rabbi said something that didn't make sense. He said that if the beginning of the Tkiya was in the bar and then the Tkiya was out of the bar, that you are Yotzei. Amud Shach or not Amud Shach, you're not Yotzei because you didn't have the beginning. The Gemara tried to say that's extreme because it isn't as Tkiya, but now the Gemara is saying it's not extreme. In any case, even if you would have had an echo in the beginning or the end, also you're not Yotzei. So back to the kasha, the first line doesn't make sense. Let's just scroll up a second to the top line to see what we're going to challenge now. Here it said, top line, mixes Tkiya, but boy mixes Tkiya, but fasa boy, so it doesn't make sense. If the Gemara understood that the listener is outside the bar in the beginning, and the one who's blowing, the blower is inside the bar coming up. And the beginning, when he was blowing inside the bar, the man outside, he heard an echo. And then when he finally came out, when the blower came out, then the listener heard a tkiya, authentic tkiya. So why is he Yotzei? The beginning was an echo. So this has to be, the top line has to be explained. The Gemara is going to answer that we're not talking about a listener who's outside. Here goes the Gemara, top line over here. We're not talking about the listener who's outside and he heard the echo. We're saying that the person who's blowing, the blower, is the question. One in question is he Yotzei.
Wherever he is, he's
right. So in the bar, we said a person who's in the bar doesn't hear the echo, and once he's outside, the chauffeur's also outside, so there's no echo there also. That's why he's Yotzei, because there was no echo. And if you heard an echo in the beginning or the end, you're not Yotzei. The reason why Yotzei because there is no echo in the beginning when he was inside the bar, so there was no echo, and then when he came up, the shofar also came up, his ears came up, everything's up, and no echo anymore. We're talking about the person, the blower, as he's coming up, he's Yotzei. The person who's listening outside is not Yotzei because he heard echo in the beginning. But then the Gemara says doesn't make sense. He didn't hear any echo, for sure Yotzei. You're allowed to climb a ladder, you're allowed to go up steps while you're blowing, that's not a problem. So what's the problem? What's the Chiddush? The Gemara says, it could be that his ears are outside, but the shofar is still inside. So even though he's coming up, it is a case of him hearing an echo. Maybe he does hear an echo because even though the shofar is still inside the bore and his ears are outside, you can think about, first of all, we spoke about which way do you hold the shofar, face up or face down. Everyone does like the maril that the Ramah brings down, that you do up because Allah Lakim B'Sruah. You said that the Pashas in the Gemara was that you do it up, you do it face down, downward, curved down, because it's supposed to be the kafif inish nafshay. It's supposed to be humble. It's supposed to be a curved shofar. Some say that it might have been more pashut according to the Gemara to have it down. Anyway, the Gemara here says a case where the ears are higher than the shofar. So either think of the shofar bent curved downward, so even though his ears are up out of the bore, but the shofar is still in the bore, or you have one of these long shofaros. You see this farther in the long shofaros, and he had it down. So it could be that he'd be out of the bore, and he's hearing the echo. So you might think that even though he's coming up, still he heard an echo. That's the chiddush. Kamash Malan, that you're not choshish that his ears came out of the shofar, out of the bore before the shofar did.
We have a Mishnah also saying that I think that Rosh Hashanah, the shofar is Yael.
But we don't pass like that. You're true, Yael Pashut, but we pass in Ayel as a chomer. We do a curved one in Rosh Hashanah. Everything's kosher. We said Kol Shofar is ksherim. You could use Yael if you don't have anything else, but it is better to use Ayel. Come on, the kafif nafshe and the kafif kayif nafshe would be better. That's the end of the first sugya. And just to sum it up, just to get that's the end of the first sugya, and it goes back to what we said before. You have to hear the entire tkiyah. Even if you had a shear of the tkiyah long enough in part of the tkiyah, that's not going to. You must hear the whole tkiyah. If the Baal Tekiyah blew very long, you have to hear the whole thing, both the beginning and the end. And we just mentioned that sometimes, when the Tekiyah does a long tkiyah or the tkiyah gadola, sometimes people start, you hear a rumbling in the shul. People start saying Hayom or Ras Olam or some Yiratzon. So you're not supposed to do that because then you didn't hear the tkiyah. And even though if he's going over time, you have to hear the whole tkiyah. And that's what the Gemara says over here. And the Gemara thought not. The Gemara thought only maybe when it's out of this man, like out of the ballpark Lagami. But the Gemara came out, it's not true. That even any kind of a disturbance, like an echo, also disturbs both the beginning and the end. You must hear the whole tkiyah. All the Gemara's kiddush was that if you're coming out of the bar, so you're not choshish that the ears came out before the shofar, and he still heard the echo. Kamash Malana. That's
Rebbe, or ask, if you blew at the end of the day near Shkia, and the first part of the kol was in the right zman, and when it ended, it was after Shkia.
Also, it's the same thing. You're right. That case also, if it's after the time, so then you're not Yotzei. It must be that the whole tkiyah was in the time. Yes, that will be also the same as the Gemara. Amud HaShachar. Good. Next Gemara, new sugya.
Is there any maximum on the tkiyah shofar in a normal fashion?
No. You can do as long as you want, as long as you can. Yeah. They talk about the shvarm and the trua that it shouldn't come to be a tkiyah, but as far as the tkiyah goes, you can go as long as you want. I'm sorry. Okay.
And then you have to sort of say make the percentage, sort of say between the trua and the shvarm.
I don't remember. New sugya, and this goes into the sugya about the Isser Hana. And this is going to be the name of the sugya is going to call the mitzvah slav lehenis nitnu. We've heard it once before. If mitzvahs are considered, if fulfilling a mitzvah is considered a personal benefit that you're not supposed to benefit sometimes, this or not, that's what the Gemara is going to come out, but we don't know that yet. The Gemara starts. Am Rav Yehuda. If you have a shofar, the horn of a ram, that's a korban olah. Rashi talks about that it has to be that he removed the shofar while it was alive. So that's Rashi goes into, not talking about after it was killed already. So we're going, without all the details, a korban olah, and he got the shofar out of the korban olah. So it says don't use it. You're not supposed to be you're not supposed to benefit from a korban. So don't use the shofar of a korban olah. But the Diavad Yotze, Imtaka Yotze, even though Lachatchili shouldn't have used it, but Diavad, if you blew it, you are Yotze. But the shofar Shlomim, Lo Yitka, Imtaka Lo Yotze. if he uses the shofar of an animal which is a korban shlomim, then not only shouldn't he do it, if he did it, also not yotzei. And the Gemara doesn't know the difference. What's the difference? Both of them are kabbanis. What's the difference between korban ola and korban shlomim? Korban shlomim should be worse. Why should that be? Because ola bas mili chibun the moral ba nafkal lechulin. Bas shlomim la bnei milinu yisuhu derachibu v'lo nafkal lechulin. The thing is that if somebody is he does the veir of doing the ila, he benefits from kachim, so it goes lechulin. The kachim becomes mundane. It loses its kedusha. So a korban ola, I don't know the details over here, but it says that a korban mila, korban ola is mila, and a korban shlomim there's not. Rashi says only on the murim after you did the zrikas adam, so then there's mila on that part because it's only lashem. But the parts that are still also for a person is also going to be eating it, like the rest of the korban shlomim, so then there's no mila. A korban ola is all to Hashem, so there's mila. So if somebody benefited from the mila, since from the korban ola, that's considered he was moel, he was benefited from hektish, and becomes chulin. So therefore, since it becomes chulin, he can be yosei with the tkiyah shofar. But a korban shlomim that there's no meila, so then it doesn't. But it's also to benefit from it. But there's no meila, so therefore it doesn't change to chulin. That's why there's the ola in this case. It seems like counterintuitive that the ola is going to become more lenient over here. Mitocha chumra, it comes to kula. Since there's meila, so it goes out to chulin, and therefore you can be yosei with the shofar with the eved. But by the shlomim that it doesn't, there's no meila, so it doesn't go out to chulin. So you're not yosei. The Gemara is
And it says it doesn't ride on. It means it doesn't ride on the fact that there's a meila. What is it? What's the low rakiv?
The rachiv. An isser is riding on it, like you said. An isser is riding on it, and therefore it means it doesn't go out the chulin. So therefore, there's still an isser hana. On the korban ola, the isser hana goes off because once you are moel, then it becomes chulin, so there's no more isser hana. But by the shlomim, there's no isser meila. So, but it is also to benefit from it, but it doesn't become meila. So the isser is still riding on it. Doesn't go out to chulin. I don't understand the side point. I don't understand that even if there be an isser hana, you did an isser. Why is that a reason why you shouldn't be yotzei? This I didn't get. That even if there is an isser hana, so you did an isser, you benefited from it. Why is that a reason you shouldn't be yotzei? There's one point that he did an isser, so he gets a vera for benefiting from hektish. But why is that a necessarily reason why I can't be yotzei a mitzvah? This connection I didn't get. Mitzvah baba vera. So even with the Yevid, he's not going to be yotzei. Maybe. Okay, I didn't think of that. Yeshakov. Maybe that's the reason. Mitzvah baba vera. But the Gemara challenges this that it wouldn't make sense by a korban ola. Maskef larava. Emas moel the basa the taka. But kikaka be surah taka. The heart doesn't make sense. The logic, because if you say the reason why you yotzei with a korban ola is because there was a meila. When was the meila? After you benefited, after you blew, that's called that you benefited from it, and then it goes the chulin. But at the time that you blew, it still didn't go out the chulin. This logic would only make sense if you would have been benefited from the korban ola, and now you're going to blow it. Now you're going to blow with it. So then you can say that the benefit caused that you were moel, and then it went out the chulin, and now you could. But here, how did you benefit? How did it go out the chulin? Because you blew. So when you were blowing, it still wasn't the chulin. So the ola wouldn't be any better than the shlomim. The whole benefit, the whole difference, we said the ola is more reason to be yotzei is because it came chulin. When did it become chulin? After you blew. But when you blew, it still wasn't chulin. So you shouldn't be yotzei by the korban ola either.
Excuse me, also just another point to say why I shouldn't be mitzvah slap lahanis.
No, that's not a reason why you shouldn't be yotzei. That's not a reason why you shouldn't be yotzei. Let's see the opposite. We'll see in a second. That's two more lines. We'll see that's the reason why. On the contrary, that's the reason why you are yotzei. But we'll be there in a second. But so at this point, Elam Rava, if anything, because of the logic that he just said that it didn't go out the chulin, so then go to the Matyos, even the korban ola. First, the review that first said that a korban ola is better because it goes out the chulin, but Robert challenged that and said no, it only goes out the chulin after you blew. But when you were blowing, it still was kodesh. So it was also to be none from it. So therefore, it was still kodesh. So both of them were not yotzei. So Rabbi argues and says that the korban ola is just as bad, and you wouldn't be yotzei. But then Rabbi changed his mind. Then Rabbi said no. Everything is yotzei. It's true. It doesn't go to chulin, and the korban shlomim surely doesn't go to chulin, and you shouldn't have done it. You shouldn't have benefited from it. But mitzvahs weren't given to benefit from. This means it's not considered a benefit. We talk about other things. If a person is gonna, whatever, he enjoys music, maybe that's going to be considered benefit. And if a person, we'll see other cases of that could be some kind of benefits. That's why we're saying you're not allowed to, let's say korban, you're not allowed to ride the animal, you're not allowed to milk the animal, you're not allowed to lean on the animal, and surely you're not allowed to take the animal's horn and make a trumpet out of it. But here, that the whole benefit was that he did a mitzvah. There's no benefit in listening to the tkiyah shofar. He wasn't enjoying the music. He was doing it because it's a mitzvah. Is that considered a benefit that he was fulfilled a mitzvah? Mitzvahs lav lenis nitnu. Mitzvahs weren't given to benefit. It's not considered a personal enjoyment when a person fulfills a mitzvah. So therefore, there's no difference. Both of them are, I would say. It's true. You're not allowed to benefit from a korban shlomim. You're not allowed to benefit from a korban olah. You're not allowed to use it for an instrument. But he's not. He's using it for tkiyah shofar. So that's not considered a benefit, a personal benefit, and therefore you're, I would say. The Gemara still says lachatchila you shouldn't do it. It says don't blow. But the I would say. That's interesting because even though we say that mitzvahs lav lenis nitnu, it's not considered a personal benefit, but still lachatchila you shouldn't do it. Only with the evidence is good. We'll see one more issue now, and there might be a question coming up.
Is he saying that there was no me'ilah then? Because me'ilah is only
Right. True. There's no me'ilah, and you still yotze because mitzvahs are not considered a personal benefit.
Okay.
A new Gemara, which is going to be based on what we just said, that mitzvahs lav lenis nitnu, that mitzvahs are not considered, were not given to for personal benefit. It means it's not benefit in this world. Of course, mitzvahs is going to be the biggest benefit. We'll get close to Hashem. That the mitzvah says veikus b'Hashem. Shetavaratam ze'an. The person should yishtadel yidavek bo b'koch mashim shetavaratam ze'an. V'heimem mitzvahs l'shen avim sil shishorm. But that's not called the Isser Hano. Isser Hano is the benefit, something worldly pleasure. It's not considered a worldly pleasure the fact that you fulfill the mitzvah. Based on this precept that we just said, Rav Yehuda before argued here. Rav Yehuda seems to agree. Maybe a gersa change in the name, but here he says the shofar avodah zarah also lo yitka v'mutaka yotza. Even avodah zarah also avodah zarah you're not allowed to benefit from. It's also bana, but again you still yosef because it's not considered hana. If you would take a avodah zarah and blow music, whatever, you take avodah zarah, a trumpet, bugle, a guitar, and you're going to make music, so then you're benefiting from the avodah zarah, you're enjoying the music. But tkiyah shofar, for the mitzvah of shofar, is not considered a benefit, so therefore you are yotze. Here it's interesting that it says lachatchila. Here it says also, all of them said the whole time lachatchila, you should not do it. But b'diavad yotze. Oh well, there's more coming up, so I jumped a little bit, but so far everything's good. That it says even though mitzvahs lav lenis nitnu, and it's not considered a benefit, but lachatchila don't do it. Still, lachatchila don't do it. But the yotze by a korban olah, korban shlomim, avodah zarah. But there is something worse than avodah zarah. You want to say something?
Yeah. In the morning when we say that there's things that you know aim this chashuvah and you get schar in this world and
Right.
That's not.
That doesn't mean that the mitzvah, no, the fulfillment of the mitzvah is not. Hashem is going to give you a reward. That's going to be enjoyable. From the mitzvah, you're going to get money. You'll get a big house. All those things. That's going to be the honor. But the fulfillment of the mitzvah is not considered honor. The fact that I got a mitzvah, that's not what the Torah means when it says something's asur b'hana. When something's asur b'hana, the fulfillment of the mitzvah is not considered physical enjoyment. We're going to see other cases that maybe the yisod will become clear. Here it says avodah zarah also. But there is something worse than avodah zarah. That's called eroni dachas. B'shofar shel eroni dachas lo yidka v'mtaka lo yatsa. Eroni dachas means if there's a city that most of the people did avodah zarah, so we destroy the whole city, and the people that did avodah zarah are killed, and things become asur b'hana. Not only asur b'hana, you have to burn it also. You're supposed to burn it. And when something you have to burn, that becomes more chomor than regular avodah zarah. Why? The shear is considered cut up. That we said a shofar has a shear, like we said, it has to be at least a little bit bigger than a hand. It has to be that you hold it in your hand and it protrudes on both sides. But once it's chayiv sreifa, we look at it like just ashes. It's cut up. It's not anymore the shear. So that's a problem that eroni dachas has. The worse than just isser or the isser hana. If it's only isser hana, some mitzvahs lav lenis nitnu say yosef b'diavad. But something which is eroni dachas and it's chayiv to be burnt over there, not yosef because it's considered that you don't have a shear shofar. Based on the same yisod about mitzvahs lav lenis, it continues about a mudar hana. Instead of mudar hana means if somebody it's a neder that is not a lot of benefit either from the person or from the shofar. So could that interfere with the mitzvah of shofar? Even if there's a neder that is not a lot of benefit from so and so, but that so and so, the baltakeya, he still could be motzi him the kiyah shofar because that's not considered a hana based on the same yisod again and again. That mitzvah is lav lenis nitnu. So therefore, if he's going to be a musician and he's going to play for me an instrument, I'm not allowed to benefit from him. If there's somebody that I'm mudir hana that I'm not allowed to benefit from that person, so then I wouldn't be able to invite him to be the musician because I'm benefiting from him. But kiyah shofar, the mitzvah of kiyah shofar is not considered a benefit. Amud Anam shofar also mutilat kol both kiyah shel mitzvah, and also if the object of the shofar that he made on there, that I'm not going to benefit from the shofar. Also, you're not allowed to use it for music, but you would be allowed to use it. You can't wake somebody up with the shofar because that's considered the shofar is also bana. But the mitzvah of shofar, the mitzvah of kiyah shofar is not considered a benefit, so therefore also you're allowed to. There's a small kasha over here that the whole time we said that even though mitzvah lav lenis nitnu, but and you could be Yotze, but it always says don't. Like by the Ola, don't, but if you did the Yotze. And by the Shlomim, don't, but if you did the Yotze. By Avodah Zarah, don't, but if you did the Yotze. Here, by the Mudar Ano, it says that even Mutter, that needs explanation. How come over here we don't say at least Lachatchila don't? Did the Ebed, you Yotze. But it says even Lachatchila you allowed to blow from him, either the person who you Mudar Ano or the shofar that you Mudar Ano. It says Mutter Litko. So that needs explanation. How come before Lachatchila you're not supposed to only, but the Ebed is good here, even the Lachatchila is good? That needs explanation. The Mefarshim talk about that. The Gemara continues now, interesting thing, that sometimes even though he's saying Mrs. Avlanis Nitnu, but there could be some other enjoyment, which is just considered a physical enjoyment. If someone is, again, is a relationship with a person that he's not allowed to benefit from, so he said that mitzvah is not a problem, you could get mitzvah from him because that's not considered a benefit. So let's say the person that I'm not allowed to benefit from, he's the spritzer. He's the one who is sprinkling the mechatas. That means from a paraduma in order to purify somebody. He's the spritzer. He's the one who's sprinkling on people. So is that considered benefiting from him because he's making me Torah? So again, that's not a problem because mitzvahs are not considered a personal benefit. Even though before he was tamei and now he became Torah, and he's the one who did it, that's not considered. Mitzvah issue is not considered a benefit. But what if it's a hot day? It's a hot day, and I enjoy getting sprinkled on. Not because it's mechatas, because it's water, it's cool water. So no, that's a problem. Because even though the mitzvah, like a person goes to the mikvah, he became Torah, but also he enjoys the mikvah. If it's a hot mikvah on a cold day or a cold mikvah on a hot day. So that's what the Gemara is going to say, that even though the mitzvah aspect of it is not considered a benefit, but if there's a personal enjoyment, lamaisa, he's enjoying the cool water or the hot water, so then that is a problem. That doesn't go into the category of Mr. Zavlanis. That's because it happens to be hot water or cool water. That's what it says. That if someone is going to be within a mechabero, he's going to sprinkle the mechatas, the paraduma water in the winter, but because he's enjoying the cool sprinkle. Another example of that, if he has a neder, he's not allowed to benefit from this spring. So now he wants to go into the mikvah over there. He could go in order to purify himself to go to the mikvah if it's the winter, because then he's not benefiting from the cool. But because if it's hot day and he goes in for the dip, it's true he became Torah, but also he enjoyed the cool water that you're not allowed to do. So that's the end of the sugya. It comes out mitzvahs avlanis nitu, that mitzvahs we're not given for personal benefit, worldly enjoyment in this world, and therefore even something which is also bana, you still can be also the mitzvah of shofar and other kinds of mitzvahs that it says over here, mechata, to get purified, and we don't say that you're benefiting from it. Still, it says sometimes the Lachatchila don't do it. That needs explanation still. How come by the Kabbanis and by Avodah Zarah it said the Lachatchila don't do it? Only by Mudar Ano over there it says even the Lachatchila you may. That needs explanation. And then the Gemara said a side point that even though Mrs. Avlanis do, but if you happen to have a physical enjoyment also because it's a hot day and cool water, or so then it's a problem. Then you're not allowed to benefit from it. That's the end of that sugya. The next sugya starts about Kavanah. Shalchu le lavu ad Shmuel. They sent, doesn't say who sent. They sent to the father of Shmuel. If they forced him, they forced him to eat matzah on the night of the Seder, they forced him to eat matzah, he's Yotzei, which means he didn't have kavanah. This is going to be a case of no kavanah. That's what the most going to come out soon. Maybe I'm jumping. But the words were, these 4 words, matzah, yes, they forced him, and he ate matzah, he's Yotzei. The mitzvah of eating matzah on the Leila Seder. So more first of all, doesn't know who forced him. Kafalman, who forced him? Elam, a kafal shade. Kafal shade, one looks when somebody goes into a praise and he's not in control of himself. That's called like a shade, like a demon is controlling him. So that means that he didn't have his mind with him and he ate matzah in a rage or something. And he was going mad. Then he ate matzah, and he's yotzei. But like his impulse, he had impulse to eat matzah, not because of the mitzvah. But Tanya, that wouldn't be true because when he's kafal shade, he's like a shota. He's a temporary insanity. And you're not yotzei. A shota is not chayiv in mitzvahs. And if he gets out of it, if he's temporary insanity, then he gets back into his normalcy, then he has to do the mitzvah again because he wasn't yotzei the mitzvah. So the Gemara says that can be the pshat. But Tanya, itim cholam, itim shota. The word cholam means healthy. I don't know where it comes from, but it means that sometimes he's healthy and sometimes he's crazy. When he's temporarily sane, so he's sane. If he's temporarily insane, so then he's insane. So this case over here, if he would have beaten the matzah when he was insane, so it wouldn't be yotzei, not yotzei, it's like a shota. So that couldn't have been the pshat in those words. Kafal b'achal matzah couldn't have meant that a shade forced him to eat because then he was a shota at the time. So that's not the pshat. What is the pshat? Rav Ashi shekafu Parsian. Persians forced him. Goyim forced him. Why did they force him? It doesn't say. Whatever the issue was, they forced him. But the kitzur was, he didn't do it for the mitzvah. And even though he was forced to do it, and he didn't do it for the mitzvah, he's still yotzei. In a short, that's another way of saying that mitzvah says tzrichas kavana. That a person could be yotzei a mitzvah if he did the act of the mitzvah, even though he didn't have the intention to do the mitzvah, still he's yotzei. That's what, who said all that? I forgot. They sent a word to Shmuel that even if he was forced to eat matzah, which means he didn't do it b'kavana, still he's yotzei, which comes out that mitzvah says tzrichas kavana. That's another way of saying it. Mitzvah says tzrichas kavana. That you could be yotzei the mitzvah without intention of doing the mitzvah. Rabba is also meres. The Gemara brings in about matzah. That's not our subject. We're in Rosh Hashanah over here. But the Gemara brought that in order to be able to arrive at the following halacha. Tekiah, he was blowing not because of the mitzvah. He was blowing because he likes tekiah shvam true tekiah. He likes the sound. He did it for the music. So he yotzei because even though he didn't do it for the mitzvah, he did it for the music. He yotzei because mitzvah is tzrichas kavana. If it's true that if they forced him to eat matzah, he's yotzei, so then it's also going to be true that if he blew for a different reason, he blew for music, he's yotzei because mitzvah says tzrichas kavana. The Gemara says, what's the chiddush over there? Pshita hainu hach. The whole din is a chiddush, mitzvah tzrichas kavana. But just to give another example, what's the chiddush in the second example? It's true, any mitzvah. If matzah doesn't need kavana, so also shofar doesn't need kavana. But the Gemara says, no, there's a chiddush over here. Over there by matzah, the reason why it's yotzei is because the Torah said eat matzah and he ate. But over here, it might be worse. You turn the page. Now, our Gersa says, Zichron Truksib, V'haim Valmahu. The words of the Gemara sound like that here, it might be worse because the Torah says, Zichron Trua. It doesn't say blow shofar. It says, it should be a Zichron Trua. Yom Trua Yelachem. So it could be Zichron Trua means that he has to know what he's doing. It has to be like a memory. If it's going to be something about a commemoration or something like that, it has to be that he's thinking. If he's not thinking, there's no Zichron Trua. So you might think that it's worse. If he's just blowing for music, he doesn't have that Zichron Trua. And the way it says something, it said the Kamash Malan that he yotzei anyway. There's some that take out these words, some take out this avalacha, some take out these words over here, some just read it, avalacha, Masasik Balmahu. Means the Gemara's, what's the difference between matzah and shofar? In our gears, it sounds like shofar might have been the worst. Kamash Malan, that shofar is also good if you hold Mr. Saint Tzrichas Kavana. There's some take it out and they say that here, that matzah, Rashi also sounds a little bit, I'm not sure, that matzah might be better because when you eat something, that's called shekei nen, that you have a physical benefit from it. That might be more reason why you yotzei. We'll come back to that in the halacha part when we talk about the halacha, that some might say a difference. Just at this point, the Gemara says, mitzvah saint tzrichas kavana. After we say there's no difference between matzah and shofar, and all mitzvahs, there's no difference anymore. Everything is mitzvah saint tzrichas kavana, that if you did an act of the mitzvah, even though you didn't have in kavana, you still yotzei. And that's going to be the rest, an amud over here. Then maybe the bottom of amud is going to be a different subject, a related topic. But the first thing is that Rabba holds mitzvah saint tzrichas kavana. Just to point out the halacha, we don't pass like this. We pass mitzvah tzrichas kavana. Mitzvah tzrichas kavana, if you did a mitzvah without kavana, you're not yotzei. But
the Rabbanan.
So some differentiate. Some say there's only a suffix. Some say that it's only based because of a suffix. That's why we machmer mitzvah tzrichas kavana, and by Rabbanan not. But there are many poskim, including the Gra, that say it's not a suffix. It's because of vadai mitzvah tzrichas kavana, and you're not yotzei. So it might be a question. I mean, maybe what I said is a machlokas a poskim, but surely by the rise of mitzvah tzrichas kavana, some are by Rabbanan. They say it's only a suffix, and therefore by Rabbanan mitzvah yotzei, even though he didn't have kavana. But many poskim hold. I'm pretty sure that that's how the Shulchan Aruch goes. That mitzvah tzrichas kavana even by Rabbanan. I don't remember exactly Shulchan Aruch, but the Gra surely says like that. I forgot the names of the other poskim. Okay, so that's not simple. If a person did a mitzvah without, it doesn't mean he has to consciously think I'm doing a mitzvah, but it has to be that he's doing it for the mitzvah. When you go to shul with a lulav, what are you taking a lulav for? You don't hold branches. What's that for? You're not stop holding basketball. You don't have to say hindi muchan mezumah. You could, but it's not. That's not the point. I'm doing a mitzvah. What are you taking a lulav for? If the case of mitzvah saint tzrichas kavana would be you picked up the lulav and in order to take it from one table to the next table, did you get a mitzvah? So if you hold mitzvah saint tzrichas kavana, you did the act of the mitzvah, even though you weren't intending for the mitzvah. That would be good enough. If you hold mitzvah tzrichas kavana, no, I wasn't doing it for the mitzvah. But if you go to shul with the lulav, surely you're doing it for the mitzvah. So that would be that's good. Even if you hold mitzvah tzrichas kavana, nobody says you have to actually say I'm doing a mitzvah. If it's understood that's the reason why you're doing it, that's the mitzvah tzrichas kavana. If someone's reading Parshas V'asrana, on Shabbos Parshas V'asrana, he's reading the Parsha before davening, and he said the Parsha of Shema Yisrael. So if you hold Mr. Saint Shrichas Kavana, you'd be Yosef because he said the words. If you hold Mr. Shrichas Kavana, you're not Yosef. If you go to shul and you say Kriya Shema, then surely you're doing it for the mitzvah. Okay. So anyway, Agmar is going Mr. Saint Shrichas Kavana. I just in the halacha, just remember that we pass Mr. Shrichas Kavana. The Gemara says on Akashas on this. Esvei, Akasha on this. So that Mr. Saint Shrichas Kavana. How you call the parak, the second parak in Maseches Brachos. Someone was reading, like this is the case I got it from. He's reading the Torah, Parshas Vaschana. He gets man that it's time to read Kriya Shema. If he had intention, he's Yosef. No intention, not Yosef. It sounds like intention to be Yosef. My law, keeping Yosef doesn't mean he has to have kavanah in order to be Yosef. If so, the Mishnah says, Mitzvah Shrichas kavanah, that if you didn't have kavanah to be Yosef in Mitzvah Kriya Shema, even though you did the act, you read Kriya Shema, but you're not Yosef. So don't you see against Rava? So the Gemara rejects the proof. Lo doesn't necessarily mean that. Likros. Lo. It doesn't mean that kavanah to be Yosef. He had kavanah to read. That's all it means. If he had kavanah to read, then he's Yosef. If he didn't have kavanah to read, he's not Yosef. But he doesn't have to have the kavanah to have the mitzvah of Kriya Shema. He doesn't have kavanah to read. That Gemara doesn't understand. Likros. Hakakari. You have to have kavanah to read. He's reading. What does it mean he had kavanah to read? The Gemara answers that he was reading it in order to proofread. To proofread something, that's not called reading. So the Pasha says that that's not, when a person's proofreading, he's not reading. He's just, when he wants to make sure if it has all the right spelling, that's not called reading. Reading means what we call reading. For the content, not doing it for the mitzvah of Kriya Shema. So the Gemara says, if you hold mitzvahs and Shrichas Kavana, you don't have to have Kavana to do the mitzvah, but you have to at least have the Kavana that I'm doing the act. And what's the act? Not for the mitzvah, just the act. That means reading. Here, the case of Kriya Shema would be that he's doing it in order to read. He's not doing it in order to check if it's missing a vav or something like that.
So he has no kavanah for mitzvah.
If you hold Mr. Saint Shrichas Kavana, even if he didn't have Kavana for the mitzvah, he's still Yotze. As long as he meant to read, but if he meant to do something else, even though the letters came out of his mouth, but that wasn't reading. That's not called reading. There's another pshat in Taish which talks about that he mispronounced it. He said it. He didn't pronounce it correctly. But the Pasha pshat you can learn the Gemara that even if he read correctly everything, but if he wasn't intending to read, when you're proofreading, it's not called reading. Proofreading is something else that you're just reading it in order to find mistakes. So that's not called reading. But if you meant to read it, like a regular person reads, even though he didn't have kavanah for the mitzvah, still Yosef. That's what Rava is taking the position. Mitzvah saying Shrichas Kavanah. Again, another people was going to try to knock down Rava. This is our Mishnah. Someone called shofar or called Megillah. Someone was talking about a shul, or he was in his house next to the shul, and he heard the shofar or he heard the Megillah. If he had kavanah, he's Yosef. If he's not Yosef. So doesn't it say before you have to have kavanah to be Yosef? How could Rava say Mr. Saint Shrichas Kavanah? Then he should have been Yosef, even if he didn't have kavanah. He was sitting in his house and he heard the shofar, so he's Yosef, even if he didn't have kavanah. And here it says that if you have kavanah, my love and keep and leave Allah say doesn't mean that you have kavanah to be Yosef. Mr. Shrichas Kavanah? No, not necessarily. It means l'shmoa. He has to have intent to listen. He doesn't have to have intent to be Yosef in mitzvah. He has to have intent to listen. The Gemara said that doesn't make sense. He's listening. He heard it. He heard the shofar. What's the intent to listen? The Gemara answers, Sobor chamor ba'almahu. If you didn't know that it's a shofar, that's not even called a ma'aseh mitzvah. You have to do the act. If you thought that a donkey is braying, he didn't realize that it's a shofar. Then it's not Yosef because he's not even doing the act. It means the act of listening to the shofar. He has to at least know that it's a shofar. If he knew that it's a shofar and he didn't have time to mind to be Yosef, Rabbi will say that it's Yosef.
What does the meaning of
Chamor. Donkey.
What's the shofar's a donkey?
He was sitting in the house and he heard a noise. He thought that it was a donkey braying.
The noise was like a donkey.
He did the shofar. He thought that there's a noise. He didn't realize that it's a shofar. Then he not Yosef.
The bracha say is lishmoa lekol shofar.
I'm sorry.
The bracha that we say is lishmoa lekol shofar. Correct?
Is that a kasha or teretz? What are you coming to say with that?
Teretz.
I'm sorry.
A teretz. It's what the Gemara says.
A teretz to which kasha?
Lo lishmoa. All he had intent was to lishmoa.
I'm sorry that I don't follow. I'm not following the trend of thought.
The Gemara says, "My love, im kiven libo letzeit," and the answer is no. Lo lishmoa.
Yeah, but the shema means without not you being Yosef. When you say bracha l'shmoa kol shofar, you're doing the sheker the shanavim b'svosav v'tzivana l'shmoa kol shofar. This man, he's sitting in his living room, and he hears a shofar, and it says he's not being mechavan to be yotze. He's not doing it for the mitzvah l'shmo called shofar. He just happens to be listening to a sound of a shofar without the mitzvah. And the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Yotze, and the Gemara says, what does it mean? He's mechavan to hear. He heard without being mechavan to hear. The answer is that he might have, if he doesn't know that it's a shofar, then he's not yotze according to anybody, because he didn't even know that he's listening to a shofar. If he was listening to a shofar, Rabbi will say that yotze, even though he didn't have kavanah to be yotze the mitzvah. So Rabbi is still holding his ground that you're not yotze the mitzvah, that you could be yotze mitzvahs even without kavanah. Mitzvah saying tzrichas kavanah. There was a kasha from another Mishnah coming up, or was it ready? I forgot if it was already. Niskaven shomea, lo niskaven mashmiya, mashmiya lo niskaven shomea, lo yotze ashi niskaven shomea mashmiya. You have the mashmiya. The shomea is the listener. The mashmiya is the person who is making it to be heard, like the blower of the shofar, the blower, the reader of the Megillah. That it's not to have one kavanah, you have to have both kavanah. That if the listener had kavanah, but the blower, let's say, didn't have kavanah, or the blower had kavanah and the listener did not have kavanah, it's not yotze until you have both of them. The shomea and the Gemara wants to say, if it means kavanah, everything makes sense. That you have to have both of them, the blower and the listener, both of them have to have kavanah to be yotze, to be motzi. But if you say that we're talking about just to know that it's a shofar, so you're right. The listener, he doesn't know what it is. You could say he has to know that it's a shofar. If you think that it's a donkey, then it's not good. But the blower, he knows he's not a donkey. He knows that he's the one who's blowing. So how could you say that the blower has to know that he's blowing? That doesn't make sense. You're right. You could say that the listener has to make sure that he has to know that it's a shofar. And he might have thought that he just heard a noise. He doesn't know what it is. Might have been a donkey, a siren. He doesn't know what it is. So then you say that he knew that it's a shofar. What does the Mishnah mean to say that the case where the mashmiya didn't know what is happening? Doesn't mean to say that if he was blowing only for music, that's not good enough. You can't. What's the case that the blower has to have kavanah? Kavanah that what? If you say that kavanah for mitzvah is necessary, then it means if he's blowing for music, it's not good. He has to be mechavan for the mitzvah. But if you say mitzvah is not sfichas kavanah, he doesn't have to be mechavan for the mitzvah. He can be mechavan for the shir. But you can't say the answer. He thought that it's a donkey. He knows that he's blowing. So the Gemara says also an answer to that. He's just making sounds. That's not even called. Some say that he just, let's say, I'm not sure if that's what the Gemara means, but let's say he just wanted an example. Let's say an example. Sometimes people, the Baltakir, they blow out the saliva from the shofar, they just blow through it. And it comes out a sound. He didn't even mean to blow. Here the Gemara says, he wanted to make just not sounds that are even considered the right sound. He didn't mean to make the right sound. He meant to make a different sound than Gamri. And it came out the right sound. So that's a chisaron, even if you hold Mr. Saint Tzrichas Kavanah, but he didn't even have Kavanah to do the Maisa. There's 2 points. One is that if you're doing the Maisa, it's not enough. You have to even have Kavanah to do the mitzvah. That's what we're talking about. And Rabbi says you don't need that Kavanah. Even if you're not Kavanah to be Yotze the mitzvah, Mr. Saint Tzrichas Kavanah. But at least you have to intend to do the act. So the word gives all kinds of examples. What does it mean that you didn't have Kavanah to do the act? Either by Kriya Shema, he just meant what did we say before by Kriya Shema? That he meant to be Magia. He didn't even mean to read. He just meant to proofread. Or by the sound of the shofar. He thought that a chamor is braying. Or that this person who's blowing, he thought that it's not going to come out the whole sound, the regular sound of a Kriya shofar. So these are the cases that, so Rava still protected himself. Rava still holds on to his position that mitzvah says tzrichas kavanah. That you don't have to have kavanah to be yotze the mitzvah, nor to be yotze. You yotze the mitzvah, even if you didn't have kavanah to be yotze. And there might have a couple of kashas. All of them, Rava deflected all the kashas. He's still holding his ground that mitzvah says tzrichas kavanah. The rest of the page now is going to go to still attack that based on a yesod that's called baltosif. Baltosif means that there's an avera to add on to the mitzvahs. And the Gemara goes with the assumption that if you hold mitzvahs tzrichas kavanah, so you're not the only mitzvah, only kavanah to do the mitzvah. So do baltosif is only going to be if you intended to do the mitzvah more than you're supposed to. But if you hold mitzvahs, but if you didn't have kavanah to do the mitzvah, so the mitzvah you wouldn't have been yosei, so you won't be transgressing doing more either. It's only going to be, you only can consider it transgressing that you added on to the mitzvahs if you would have been yosei the mitzvah and you did even more. But if it's a kind, if you need kavanah to do yosei the mitzvah, you only could be over baltosif if you had kavanah to do the mitzvah more, and then you did the mitzvah more than you're supposed to do, but he did it for the mitzvah. If you hold mitzvah saint tzrichas kavanah, it comes out of chumrah. That it comes out as far as mitzvah saint tzrichas kavanah, you could be yosei the mitzvah without kavanah, but it might come out a chumrah that you'll be over baltosif without intention either. The same way you could be yosei the mitzvah without kavanah, you could be over baltosif also without kavanah. That's the Gemara's assumption when he goes into, because if you hold that you could be yosei the mitzvah without kavanah, so if you did more than the mitzvah without kavanah, you could be over baltosif also. That's going to be the Gemara's kasha.
What's Mitzias?
Here's the case. If somebody continues to stay in the sukkah on the 8th day, he should be chayiv malchus, not with the kavanah of doing a mitzvah. If he has kavanah to do the mitzvah, then yes, he'll be chayiv malchus because he's adding on to the mitzvah. The sukkah mitzvah is only to stay in the sukkah 7 days. He's staying 8 days. Forget about why we do Shmini Atzeres and Chutz La'aretz because maybe it's the 7th day. But put that aside. A person does mitzvah past the time. So if he's doing it with the kavanah to do the mitzvah 8 days, to only say 7 days, so then he's doing baltos. But if you say that mitzvah says tzrichas kavanah, then even if he's going to be sitting in the sukkah without the kavanah to do the mitzvah, he still should be over baltos. Like the same way that you make mitzvah says tzrichas kavanah, he just did a mitzvah within the 7 days without the kavanah, so then it should be considered baltos if he stays in the sukkah 8 days, even if he didn't have kavanah. That's a problem. Amalo, so he responded, I guess, Rabba, Shani Omer, mitzvahs ain't over, alein ela b'zmanan. A new issue of baltos. Kavanah, you're right. As mitzvah the kavanah, you could have been over even without kavanah. Same way you also did mitzvah without kavanah, you also could be over baltos without kavanah. But there's a new issue, a new factor that comes in with baltos. The issa to add on to the mitzvah is only when it's within the time frame of the mitzvah. Within the time frame, like some examples Rashi brings down. If you're going to wear tefillin with 5 parshios, or you'll take 5 minim, you'll take the lulav, you put something else over there also. So then you add it on to the mitzvah within the time frame of the mitzvah. But once the time frame of the mitzvah is over, there's no more baltosif anymore. So therefore, on the 8th day,
You burn them in the night.
what?
Burn tefillin at night or something like that.
Okay, it then depends what the mitzvah tefillin is. We hold mitzvah tefillin is also at night also, but he doesn't wear it because he might fall asleep. But in a case where it's past the time of the mitzvah, then it's no baltosif.
And Rava says Rava would hold that on the 8th day, even if he had kavanah, he would
Yes,
not.
yes.
Because
It comes out, like Yaakov saying a good point, that now he doesn't care about kavanah anymore. He says that kavanah is not a factor because he could go to the mitzvah even without kavanah, and baltosif also could be without kavanah. The reason why not over baltosif is because it's past the time frame, and if it's past the time frame, you're not over baltosif. And like Yaakov is pointing out, even if you had kavanah to do the mitzvah, not only now that you didn't have kavanah to do the mitzvah, even if you have kavanah to do the mitzvah on the 8th day, there's no baltosif after the time. Nice point. It's going to have relevance at the end of the
There's no
sukkah.
mitzvah. In other words, you're doing it out of the time frame. It is never a mitzvah.
Yeah, but
So
yeah,
what's the point
yes,
of it?
no, but it's about Tosef. He's adding on to the mitzvah. We would have thought without this Gemara that you're adding on to the mitzvah. The Torah says 7 days. He's doing it 8 days. So about Tosef. The same way the Torah says take 4 minim. He took 5 minim, or 4 parashos and the 20 put 5. So the Torah says 7 days. He did 8 days. So we would have thought that that's considered about Tosef. And Rabba, in order to get out of this kasha, because he said that kavanah is not a factor, so it comes out if a person is going to sleep in the sukkah on the 8 days about Tosef. So Rabba says that there's no about Tosef out of the time frame. The time frame is a certain thing, 7 days. There's no baltosif after that. Within the time frame, there's baltosif. But whatever he would do, the sukkah doesn't apply. But let's say lulav and tefillin, these cases that within the time frame he does more, that's baltosif. But out of the time frame, there's no baltosif. That's what he is answering the kasha.
like shofar, like everybody would agree that if somebody who blows the shofar on the 3rd of Tishrei didn't add anything. Is that true? There wouldn't be any baltosef for blowing a shofar on the 3rd of Tishrei.
Surely according to what the Gemara says now, without that might be a point that I don't know, that if the Gemara doesn't hold of this, if without Rabba's teretz about Bismanan, would everybody agree that if it's mamish not connected to the Chag at all on the 3rd day, so is all would the Gemara thought that there is baltosef? He's making a new mitzvah.
I think we hold it.
But Rava would hold that, right? Rava would hold there's no baltosef in that.
Here the Gemara says not. Here the Gemara says no
No, I'm
baltosef.
saying not like, but the halacha doesn't seem
Okay,
to
it could be
like
at the end of the page. We'll see if somebody argues. But please come back to that again, Lev Yaakov. Yes, Rabbi Lezer.
But in a chami, it's not the time for the mitzvah, but it is the time for the avera.
No, the Gemara is saying now. That's what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying that's what the Gemara is saying. Mitzvahs, here it is. Mitzvahs ain't over alein. The Gemara is not saying they're not kind of mitzvah, surely not. But mitzvahs ain't over alein ela b'zmana.
Shel mitzvah.
Yeah, we're talking about the mitzvah.
So
Yeah,
no
we're talking about
baltosif.
baltosif. He says there's no baltosif out of the time. That's the Gemara's chiddush. The Gemara thought that there was, and the Gemara says no, there's no baltosif out of the time frame.
Yasi Yasinim v'ruchim mevarchinen. In a chami that we sit where there's no chash of baltosif, but if there would be to sleep there would be baltosif.
There's no-
That's psak, maybe. Right. We are scared for sleeping. We're not scared of sitting and eating. And
There's no difference between sleeping and eating. There's no difference. The mitzvah, when the Gemara says to sleep, it's the same thing would be to eat also. There's no difference as far as baltosif. If he's doing it more than the Torah says, so then there should be a baltosif. And the Gemara is saying that since he's not mechavan for the mitzvah, first the Gemara thought that the reason why he's not baltosif because he's not mechavan for the mitzvah. And the case that we have to do in the case because the 8th day might be the 7th day, we're doing it for the chash. I'm not sure if the Gemara includes that in the subject, but once the Gemara says that there's no Baal Tosef out of the time, he's still doing the mitzvah because it might be the 7th day. And the Sadat is the 8th day, he's not it's called out of this month. There's no Baal Tosef. The Gemara is a kasha. On this Yisod, the Gemara said that there's no Baal Tosef out of the time. The Gemara is going to ask a kasha that there is Baal Tosef out of the time. Most of Hashem Rabba. Hashem Rabba is a kasha on this Yisod that you say there's no Baal Tosef after the time. It says in a brayso, "Menayin lekoin shalom leduchan shalayom, all of the naslam li Torah rishos levarach es Yisrael." What's the bracha achas mishali? A kohen shouldn't say, since the Torah permits me to bless Yisrael, I'm going to add my own. Besides, Yirach Hashem yishmerecha, Yar Hashem, Yisa Hashem. He's going to say, keep going. Hashem alokei avosechem, Yosef alechem. He wants to bring another bracha. Hashem should add on to you. Kachem melafamim. So it says, no, you're not allowed to do the Talmud Lomar. Lo sosif al davar. You should lo tosif. You're not supposed to add on. So the Gemara is asking here. It says it's about tosif and brechas kohanim. He said three brachas. He says, Yivarechecha, Yoar Hashem, Yisa Hashem, and then he says, Hashem alokei avosechem, Yosef alechem. And it says here there's all about tosif. Even the Baruch lay, once he finished saying the three brachas that he's supposed to, the three psukim, Yivarechecha, Yoar, Yisa, so he's already out of the time frame. The Gemara considers that that's a time frame. So therefore, how could he be over? According to Yo Yisod, you're not over about tosif out of the time frame. This is out of the time frame. Here it says you're over even though it's out of the time frame. The Gemara says he's doing it in the middle of the brachas. He did finish. He's in the middle of Yivarechecha Hashem. So yeah, he's in the middle. So he throws something in the middle. But if you finish the whole brachas out of the time frame, no Baal Tosef. But the Gemara says not only that, but Tanya is seeing. It says even he finished, he's also of Baal Tosef. The Gemara tries to get out of it still, seeing bracha achas. He only finished one bracha, but he still didn't finish all three brachas. The Gemara says no, it doesn't say that. But Tanya, see him kol b'chosef. Even if he finished all the three brachas, he's still over Baal Tosef if he says fourth bracha. So you see that you're over Baal Tosef even out of the time frame. The Gemara says Shani Yacha Chivin the Ilu Misram Leitzivachina Mavarich Kuli Yom Azim. Even though he finished saying all three brachas already, Joseph and mitzvah of brachas kohanim, but if he gets another tzibur, he can do it again. If a kohen comes to another tzibur, he can say brachas kohanim again. So it's not called that the time frame is over. By Sukkot, once 7 days is over, it's over. In Malasot, Sukkot is over. So then there's no Baal Tosef out of the time frame. But you can't say that just because he did his personal three brachas that the kohen Joseph and mitzvah already know out of the time frame, because he can do it again. If another tzibur comes, he can do it another time.
So I assume that if it's Zman Tefillah after this minion.
The issue is not Zman Tefillah. You're talking about according to what we do brachas kohanim during Shemon Esrei. It could be, but the point is that all the more saying is that he could do it again, even though he did the mitzvah, he could do it again. So it's not called that the time frame is over. And therefore, if he has on more brachas, even though right now there's no other tefillah, no other minion afterwards, but there could be a minion afterwards. So therefore, it's considered that the Zman is not over yet.
That's a kasha on Rabbah.
No, that was his answer. Again, Rav was the one who said that you're not over Baal Tosef out of the time. He was the one who made this new chiddush and no to answer kasha on himself. It's not again from the beginning. He's the one who has to get the hasikum. He's the one who said that mitzvah says yichas kavanah. Because they had to Gemara kasha, if that's true, he should be over Baal Tosef on the 8th day. And no to answer that, he said it's no Baal Tosef out of the time. The Gemara the kasha, if so, then there should be no Baal Tosef after birchas kohanim. The Gemara says no, it's not over. Even though he finished birchas kohanim one time, he could do it again. And another tzibur will do birchas kohanim a second time. So it's not called the time frame is over. But anachanami, if the time frame is over, like on the 8th day of Sukkot, there's no Baal Tosef. And the Gemara wants to prove this. And we're not telling you, how do I know this? So there's a long brayso over here, but we'll try to make it short. That talks about some korbanos. They're supposed to, you have matnas dam. You put the blood onto the mizbeach. Sometimes you put one blood one time, one corner, like a shlamim. Sometimes shlamim is two, like a bechor, ma'aser, pesach, yipu, matan echas. Sometimes you do four, like a korban chatas, you do on all four corners. And here you got two korbanos mixed up. You don't know if it's supposed to be put one time or four times. That's the case. We're not tamer. How do I know? Unless now line, we're not tamer. How do I know there's a difference between that this far is true? That even though the mitzvah is over, since if another tzibur comes, you can do it again. It's called time frame is not over. So it brings down this mission over here. The Tanan, top first white line. The Tanan. And the b'matana achas shenesav will be done b'matana achas. You had korbanos that are supposed to be put with one placing of the blood. They're coming stuff with other korbanos. That's the same thing. As far as the halacha goes, both of them are supposed to be placed with one matana. No problem. You must have matana achas. That's not a problem. Even though you don't know which korban it is, but all of them have the same halacha. So put one placing of the blood. How about that you got two korbanos mixed up, but both of them are supposed to be put four times on the four corners? Also no problem. You must know the matadal put four times because everything's good. Here's the problem. Matan Dalit, Matan Aleph. If you have two korbanos that got mixed up, one korban is supposed to be put on all four corners, one is supposed to be put only on one corner. What are you going to do? You don't know what to do. If you do only one, so then the korban of 4 is not good. If you do the one of 4, then the one that the only supposed to be done 1. So show me Nasr b'Matan Dalit. If you show me Nasr b'Matan, it's machlokes. If Yeshua says, Rabbi says, put all the blood on all 4 corners, even though one of them is going to be supposed to only be done once. And if Yeshua says, put it only once, even though one of them is supposed to be 4. So then Yeshua says to the other one, what are you doing? I'm to Rabbi Yeshua. The one that's supposed to be done 4, it says also, Torah says, don't add on to the mitzvahs, don't subtract the mitzvahs. And here you have a korban supposed to be put on all 4 corners, and you're only putting it on 1, so you're doing less than the Torah says. So Yeshua told them back, and according to you, you have one which is only supposed to be done 1, you're doing 4, you're doing Baltosif. Yeshua, you have about that you can do on all 4 corners, and one korban is only supposed to have been done on one corner, so you're doing more than he's supposed to do. So each one says that's not a real Baltigla, not a real Baltosif, because he's not doing it only because he's of the one which isn't suffix. The Baltosif is not by itself, and you're doing it for no reason, then you're doing more than you're supposed to do. So that's Baltosif. So Yeshua says this, and me too. So don't have a time on me either. Now, in Kitzur, both of them on the same problem, that one korban is going to be done not the right way. Either you get a Baltosif or Baltigra, which one is better, which one is worse. So Rabbi Yeshua says as far as why it's better to do 1 than to do 4. Again, you have 2 korbanos mixed up. One is Matan Dalit, one is Matan Echad. Rabbi Yeshua says better to do 1 than to do 4. Even though there's a problem about Tosef, Baltigra, whichever way you do, this way is better. But Kishenasata about Tosef, Basisa Maisa Biadacha. Rabbi Yeshua says you're right. Either way, we're in a pickle. Either we're going to do too much or to do too little. But he's saying it's better to do too little, which is considered like a passive transgression. It's not much a transgression, but at least passive, than to do a kumase. It's better to do 1, you're supposed to do 4. Better to do only 1, but you didn't do any act. But to do 4, and the one which is only supposed to be done once, you're doing more, that's called the kumase, that you're actively doing a partial of the transgression.
But he doesn't know what he's supposed to do.
Yeah, either way, you don't know what you're supposed to do. Actually, one of the two. The question which is the less of the 2 evils. If Yeshua says this is less of the 2 evils because it's a shikol about Tosef, but it's passive. It's about Tigra, but it's passive. But to do about Tosef is going to be active. Okay, that Adkan is the Mishnah or the Brisa. Now the Gemara is going to bring out what it wants to bring out. The one that he's supposed to do, what's the problem? You have 2 korbanos mixed up. One of them is supposed to be 1, one is supposed to be 4. The Bechor is one that's supposed to be only 1. A Bechor, Ma'aseh Pesach, Matana Achas. So the Bechor animal is the one which is only supposed to have been done once, and you can be doing it 4 times. Yeshua says you have about Tosef issue over here. But the Gemara is asking, why is there about Tosef over here? Once he did 1 Matana, the time is over. Nothing else to do. The time, it's as if to say the time frame is over. The same way the 3 brachas of Birchas Kohanim, it's over. And still, the Gemara says there's about Tosef over here. Because if you're going to do it, it's called Tosef, even though you're not Mechavan over here, and it's out of the time. Why? Forget about the Kavanah, it's out of the time. Lav mishum damina and chibin the ilum is from the buchrach mina the mazamine kula yom zimne. It must be a proof that he saw that we said before. We said with Birchas Kohanim that even though you finished the Birchas Kohanim, you did all 3 brachas already, it's still called as man because you might get another tzibur and do it again. So the one is proving that's far because over here by the Bechor, once you did the Matana, 1 Matana you're supposed to do for the Bechor, also the time is over. Why is it called still the time? Because you finished the mitzvah already. Why is it still called the time? Because you might get another Bechor. The Kohen who's doing the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, another Bechor might come. And you have to do it again. So since the mitzvah could be done again, it's not called that the time of the mitzvah is over yet. And so the Gemara wants to prove that as far by that we said before, by Birchas Kohanim is also true, that even though there's no Baal Tosef out of the time, it's still called the time because the mitzvah might happen again. He still didn't finish the mitzvah, another Bechor might come. But the Gemara is surprised at the whole proof. This whole proof is assuming that everything we said is true. That means that it's no Baal Tosef only in the time, and now the question is why is it called the time? But the Gemara says, how could you bring proof to all this? The whole Yisod is Rabba's Chiddush, that only over Baal Tosef it's within the time frame. And in order to answer Kashas, he said only within the time frame, out of the time frame not. But this is called the time frame because the mitzvah might happen again, like with Birchas Kohanim and etc. by the Bechor. But the Gemara says you can't bring a proof. It's like saying I said so. I bring a proof because I said so. That's not a proof. So here, maybe the whole Yisod is not true. You're Rabbi, you're a Machadit. You come in and say that there's no Baal Tosef out of the time. Then when you put you in the corner, we press you against the corner. So you say that you can do the mitzvah again, and that's still called the time. And you want to prove it from this din of Rabbi Yeshua. Maybe Rabbi Yeshua argues on the whole Yisod. Maybe he holds that there's Baal Tosef at any time. Maybe the whole Yisod is wrong. How could you prove your point from Rabbi Yeshua? Very strange Gemara. You can't prove your proof from Rabbi Yeshua. He also on the holy Yisod. So the Gemara explains that you see that Rav Shema bar Abba also agrees to my Yisod. And not Achi Kamina. We meant to say like this. Rav Shema bar Abba, my time is Shavik Masisin and Moshe B'Braisa. Rav Shema bar Abba, he's the one who asked the kasha from the case of the Bechor, of the Birchas Kohanim. He asked from Birchas Kohanim that how come by Birchas Kohanim you're over after the 3 brachas? It's after the time. So he thought he had a kasha on. Now he didn't ask the kasha from the Mishnah about the Bechor. Why didn't he ask from the Mishnah of Bechor? Why didn't he ask a kasha from the Mishnah? Because he knew the teretz that since the Bechor comes again, it's still considered the time. So then he shouldn't ask a kasha by Birchas Kohanim either, because again, another siva might come. I'll do Birchas Kohanim again. My time Moshe Chivin the Ilu Mishram they both Chachmina by Mazim Yinei Kol Rav Shem bar Abba understood that this far makes sense. That the reason why he didn't ask a kasha from Bechor, because right away he knew the answer is going to be that the time of Bechor is not over, because another Bechor is going to come to the base of Mikdash. So if so, Rai said, Nami, he said the Birchas Kohanim is also not difficult. For the same token that you understood that this form makes sense, it's true. I can't prove by Allah from Rabbi Yeshua, but I'm saying that you understood that this far is a good svara. That if the mitzvah could be done again, the time is not over yet. Rav Shema bar Abba, why did Rav Shema bar Abba think that is a good kasha, even though he knew the din of Bechor is not a kasha? He thought the case of Birchas Kohanim is a kasha. By the Bechor, if another Bechor comes, surely the Kohen has to do Ravod. He can't leave the Bechor that doesn't do Ravod, that he's not going to put on the Mizbeach. But by Birchas Kohanim, he doesn't have to do Birchas Kohanim again. Once a Kohen did Birchas Kohanim, he doesn't have to do it again. Tyson points out, there's still Birchas Kohanim, that a Kohen did Birchas Kohanim, even if there's another tzibur that wants him to do it again, he doesn't have to. He's not going to do Birchas Kohanim if he did it once a day. Just to get three more lines to the bottom of the page to finish the sugya, that again, Rabbi said, mitzvahs lo svichas kavanah. You can be the mitzvah even if you didn't have a kavanah to do the mitzvah. The Gemara asked on that if so, it should be baltosif on the 8th day. And Abai's answer was, or I think it was Rabbi's answer was that you're not over baltosif out of the time. That was Rabbi's, and this whole Gemara went on to ask Kashas. Answer Kashas, that was Rabbi's teretz. That the reason why you're not over baltosif on the 8th day is because it's out of the time zone. There's no baltosif out of the time zone. Rabbi's going to be also going back to that kasha. It's true, what Rabbi said, that mitzvah says to be also the mitzvah. But that doesn't mean necessarily that you can be over baltosif even without kavanah. Before the Gemara put it all together. If you could be mekayim the mitzvah without kavanah, so then it'll be baltosif without kavanah. And the answer that kasha, the Gemara, the answer that with this man out of the time zone. At this point, Rabbi said, I don't need that teretz. That you're not over baltosif, only if you have kavanah to do the mitzvah. Even though mitzvahs could be kind of mitzvah without kavanah, but the transgress baltosif is only if you have kavanah. But the Gemara says that's not true. The case of the blood over here with the blood of the korban, Rabbi Yeshua said it'll be baltosif if you're going to put more than one. He didn't have kavanah to do. He didn't have kavanah to do the mitzvah. He's doing it only for the korban that has to have a matan daled. The korban that only the bechor that's only supposed to be one. He doesn't want to do the mitzvah for that. And you see over baltosif on the bechor even though you have kavanah. So you see that mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavanah even to be over baltosif. So what's Rabbi answering? Allah Rabbi like this. Let's say slow boy kavanah. We're going still, the mitzvah says tzrichas kavanah. And you yotze the mitzvah even without kavanah. Also, lavor, to transgress the aver of baltosif, bisman or lo kavanah. If it's within the time frame, also you're over without kavanah, which is what the case of Rabbi Yeshua. That over there is considered still the time frame. Like we said, that if another bechor comes, it's not finished the mitzvah yet, so it's considered within the time. Also, you'll say you're over the aver of baltosif even without kavanah. But out of the time frame, you're only over baltosif if you had kavanah. He doesn't seem, Rabbi, this last answer of this last 3 lines over here doesn't seem that he's helping out anything as far as the Gemara's kasha teretz goes. He's saying the same teretz, that when the shalom is mano, you're not over only with kavanah. But there's a difference between what Rabbi said and what Rabbi said. Rabbi said that out of the time frame, you're not over baltosif at all. There's no such thing as baltosif out of the time. And Rabbi, in the bottom line, he says that if you'd have kavanah, then to do the mitzvah, then it'd be over baltosif even out of the time. Nothing's forcing him to say it. He's saying it's on his own. It comes out of nafkamina between Rabbi and Rabbi. If someone had kavanah to be yotze the mitzvah out of the time frame, is he over baltosif or not? That's the end of the Gemara so far. We'll continue tomorrow. But at this point, just to sum it up, the Gemara said mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavanah. As far as being yotze the mitzvah, he could be yotze the mitzvah even though he didn't have kavanah. And the whole sugi was about baltosif. Based on that, will he be over baltosif also without kavanah? On that, the first Gemara answered Rabba that there's no Baltosif out of the time frame. And once the mitzvah is over, the time also, they said the Gemara about if you would have done the mitzvah, there's no possibility to do it anymore. Like the Gemara thought Birchas Kohanim, but the Gemara said no, Birchas Kohanim is still not over because he could do it more. But if the time frame is over, out of this man, so then there's no more Baltosif. The last Gemara on the bottom says that even that, if you'd have Kavanah to do the mitzvah, he could be also, if you're over Baltosif even out of the time. If it's within the time frame, then he's also over Baltosif even without having Kavanah. But if it's out of the time frame, he's over Baltosif if it was with Kavanah. Just again to halacha. Yes.
Sitting in the sukkah on the 8th day.
Yes.
So if you don't have any kavanah, why is there a problem?
Sitting on so
Right, that's a good
the
question.
shalom is mano.
Right.
And he doesn't
You're
have
not-
a
And he doesn't
kavanah.
have any kavanah.
He doesn't want to do the
So why
mitzvah.
do you say you're not allowed to do that?
Why do we say when they're not allowed to do? We say
On the 8th day.
what do we say? Well, we always say to take off some of the
Right,
stuff.
Right,
Right.
How come we have to say that? Why is it not?
right.
Why is
I think
since
it's a
he's
chumrah. I
not
think
doing
it's
it?
a chumrah.
Since he's not doing it for the purpose of the mitzvah, it shouldn't be Baltosif.
Right.
Since it's Shalom is Manu, he's not doing it for the mitzvah. So why do we tell him to take off some of the
So
schachot to
it
do
shouldn't
something?
look like you have kavanah and.
But it wouldn't be Baltosif anyway.
Yeah, but he knows I don't have kavanah. I want to sit because it's nice day.
But we're saying that you could be just like you could be Yotzim without Kavanah, you could be over.
No, the Gemara came out. That's what the Gemara came out. That was Gemara's kasha. That was the whole Gemara's kasha. But the Gemara said, the Gemara comes out. No, that Shalom is Mano. You're not over. If anything, only with kavanah to be Yosef. But he's not doing it for the mitzvah. So Moshe is asking that you should be allowed to sit in the sukkah on the 8th day without kavanah, according to everybody. Why does the Gemara say in sukkah that you're supposed to do something to show that you're not doing it for the mitzvah?
Rather, like we always machmir, maybe he has a bit of a kavanah that he.
Maybe it's only the chatchila to make
You
it.
know,
To make
maybe
it.
lechatchila.
But the Maisi shouldn't be over Baltosif. It sounds like a good point, and maybe the answer is like they're saying that just to be better or just better, just to be mams. But you wouldn't be over Baltosif. You wouldn't be Baltosif anyway. I'll try to look into it by tomorrow. So that's to sum up. We're over time already. Just to see the sugis that we spoke about today. One was about tkiya. You have to get a whole tkiya, even if you had enough of a shear. It's not just only here beginning to end. And the more thought not like that with the echo, but the more comes out now that you have to hear the whole tkiya. After that, mitzvah slav lehenis nitnu, and therefore with a shofar of a ola, of a shlomim, of a bodazara, even though you shouldn't do it, but with the other yosei because mitzvah slav lehenis nitnu. And Mudra knows even Lachatchila says you're allowed to be Yotzei the shofar from a person or a shofar that you're not allowed to benefit from because mitzvahs of Lenis Nitnu. But the Gemara did say, Agav, that if you're enjoying the cool water of the mikvah or something like that, so then that's a regular personal enjoyment. So then you're not allowed to be nana if it's asabana. After that, the Gemara said the din about eating matzah, being forced to eat matzah, or someone just blew the shofar from music, and that's the sugi called kavana, and mitzvah says tzrichas kavana. And this Gemara, the whole sugi goes mitzvah says tzrichas kavana, and the whole kasha was only going to be from wherever it said Mishnah. It sounds like you have to have kavana. The Gemara says you have to do the mitzvah, do the act, but not for the ma'aseh mitzvah, not for the purpose of being yotze the mitzvah. And then the Gemara kasha from Al Tosef, and the Gemara said more or less the answer is that out of this man you're not over. Some say that if you had kavana beferish to be yotze, it will be over. Some say even if you had kavana also there's no aver Al Tosef after this man. But that was all going to the sheet of mitzvah saying tzrichas kavana. Once again, we pass the mitzvah tzrichas kavana, not like the Gemara goes by us. And there is one chiddush that the Rambam says in Seshes Shulchan Aruch that if someone ate matzah without kavana, he is yotzei, even though mitzvah says tzrichas kavana. That's a big chiddush. And they say maybe because what the Gemara means over here is that matzah is different because shekei nena, like Rashi on the bottom of Amar Aleph says there's something physical enjoyment that he ate. Maybe he's maybe for some reason. And the Mishnah brings down that they argue on this Rambam and Shulchan Aruch and eat my matzah also. If you didn't have kavana, not yotzei, you pass the mitzvah tzrichas kavana. Yashikol, everybody. Thank you. Shavua Tov.
Thank you very much. Shavua Tov.
Thank you. Shavua Tov, everybody. Thank you.